Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Lagore. I'm the product specialist for Skywatcher here in North America. And this is the Skywatcher What's Up webcast, where we take a look at all things astronomy, from what's up in the nighttime sky to equipment to just tips on imaging and observing. And if you're new to the webcast, thanks for joining us. If you like what you see, subscribe to the channel because it's going to keep you up to date with all of our future content and what's coming out next. And if you are joining us again, thanks for everybody who's joining us again. And happy Friday. If you are watching this after the fact, thanks for watching. All the Skywatcher What's Up webcasts are recorded, so they are saved on the YouTube channel, so you can go back and check them out for any time that you want to feel like you want to watch it. So we do this every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, right here at the Skywatcher USA YouTube channel. Each day is different. We try to make each topic unique, and of course at the end of every month we have a special guest speaker. And today we actually have a really good friend of ours, and if you haven't ever had the chance to use or image or even have the luxury of owning a Stellarvue telescope, I highly recommend checking them out at some point in your observing career. They're phenomenal instruments. But we actually have the president and owner with us today, Vic Maris, and we're going to bring him on here in just a second. So a big thanks for Vic for joining us today. And we're going to bring him on. And Vic is actually live from the Stellarvue optics shop today. So it's kind of cool having him here. So let me get Vic in here. Hey, Vic, how you doing this morning?
Hey, if it was any better, I couldn't stand it.
So you're actually at Stellarvue. This is where you guys do... This is where a Stellarvue equipment and telescopes basically come to life.
Yeah, this is our nursery, we like to call it, the Stellarvue Nursery. And every so often, we'll produce scopes, and every so often the scopes come back to the nursery. Somebody will drop it on their driveway or something, and they'll come back and we'll fix them. It doesn't matter if they're 22 years old or not, we'll take care of them. But yeah, this is where the optics are hand figured actually in our optical shop here. And it also is our testing facility where we have our Zygo phase shifting laser interferometer. And we'll be looking at that near the end of the program here to show people how we go about testing optics after we hand figure them.
Perfect. Well, I know we all enjoy seeing stuff like that, so hopefully we can take a look at that here a little bit later. But I always like to ask, the first thing I like to ask if we ever have any special guest on is how they got into astronomy, because we all at some point fell down the rabbit hole and got involved in telescopes and yada yada yada. So how did you get started in your career in astronomy, just as an amateur astronomer?
Yeah, I think my story is like everybody else's story, like your story. It's just that mine happened probably a lot longer ago. I grew up during the space age where we'd go outside and the balloon is going over at a certain time. And that meant the satellite. That meant, first of all, Sputnik, and then, of course, Telstar and all those satellites that were so amazing for us to see. Of course, now the sky is just cluttered with them. But that got me looking up. And I remember looking up at the stars. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, so there were probably 5 or 6 stars out at night. I mean, it was light polluted. It's a suburb of LA. But I just was intrigued. What are the stars? And I asked my parents for a telescope, as many people do. We didn't have much money. And I remember my dad taking me to LA, and we went to pawn shops, and he, tried to talk the guy down. I ended up with a refractor, the quintessential 60 millimeter refractor, and it had a wobbly mount and horrible optics. And so I struggled with it for a long time, quite a long time. And I knew nothing. And I was in the 7th grade in my electronics class. Somebody asked me, "Do you have a telescope?" I said, yeah, It's not very good. He goes, well, you got to make one. And I said, you can do that? And yeah, you can make telescopes. So he brought that Edmund and A. Jaeger's catalog, and I started, saving up my allowance money. And the first thing I did was to build a 4¼ inch reflector, like many people do, using parts. Then I decided I'm going to do a mirror. So I bought a 6-inch mirror kit, and I polished the mirror. And I was having some real trouble parabolizing it. And so I went down to Cave Optical Company, which was in Santa Monica. And, I wanted to ask some questions. And I said, is Tom Cave here? And no, he's not here. But the optician came out of the back room, and he saw I had this mirror in my hand, and he invited me in the back room. And for about an hour, he showed me how to do it, which I thought was incredibly kind of him, to spend that kind of time with his kid. So then that mirror was made, and then I decided to build a refractor. And I could never get that refractor to color correct. I worked on it probably for a couple of years. I walked around a barrel a long time, and I could never get this color out. I'm at Sky and Telescope, however many years later. This was after I had started Stellarvue. And I told the story. Well, they asked me, when did you make your first refractor? Back in the late 60s, but it wasn't very good. And one of the editors raised his hands, and he said, did you get this lens kit from... And I said, yeah. And he goes, I did the same thing back then. They had the wrong glass. And it was like, here I am, I don't know, 40, 50 years later, finally realizing, it wasn't me. And that was kind of an amazing thing, because I would have gotten into refractors a lot sooner had I not encountered that difficulty of bad glass. And so, I just kept making scopes. I made an 8-inch Newtonian, then an 8-inch classical Cassegrain. And then I went off to work in parks, for 30 years for my career. And, but all through that, astronomy continued to be my passion. We put telescopes in parks. We did the Robert Ferguson Observatory in Santa Rosa. And, I ended up teaching at the Learning Exchange when I worked in Sacramento. And the thing that was cool about that was that it was my students that I was teaching astronomy to that talked me into starting a telescope company. My first response when they said, you should make your own telescopes and sell them, was, I'm not crazy. Why would anybody do that? And then I got to think about it more and more. And then 22 years ago, we started Stellarvue, which is kind of cool.
That's quite a history, actually. I think, I think people forget how long it takes to actually get companies like this up and running, and just the background it takes for someone like yourself to go from getting interested in astronomy to having enough love and passion for it to want to dive into this as a full-time career, and putting your own, blood, sweat, and tears and money into making it a thing.
That's the thing I hope customers understand, is that we're all in this because of our passion. A lot of customers will call and they'll ask me a question about some other company, and they say, we know you're all in competition and stuff and whatever. And I go, actually, we're friends first, because we all share the same passion of making telescopes or doing whatever it is we do. We all love to look up at the night sky and enjoy the universe. I guess what happened to me, I'll never forget the first night I went out under a truly dark sky. This is like 2 years down the road. My parents ended up visiting people who were in Yucca Valley, I think. And, and it was a new moon. And I brought my little telescope with me. And I went outside and looked up, and my mind was blown. You talk about, your tagline, be amazed. I was amazed. And, I didn't know where to start. And it's that kind of inspiration that we have that you really can't put into words, the stars inspire me, that type of thing. But once it's got its hooks in you, it can last a lifetime. And you end up being able to go out and do things like view a total eclipse of the sun, go into places that have a truly dark skies and go down into the southern hemisphere and observe. All of these things are like, they're things that you remember throughout your life. So for us, it's a passion, and that's why so many people, like you, Kevin, you have a definite passion for astronomy, and it comes across. And I think that's the thing I like about all of the vendors that I get to work with and get to know and talk at NEAF with and such, is that we all just share this passion, and we're not in it for the money. I'm fortunate in that I have a retirement income, so I can reinvest everything we make in equipment and stuff like that. So I've been able to become like a amateur scientist, as we continue to develop this optical shop and to produce better and better optics.
And I think that's an important note that a lot of maybe our customer base doesn't get to see, because it's on the back end. You don't get to see a lot of what goes on into it. But I know we get a lot of people who are, we've had people who are like, oh, I don't like this, or I don't like that. I'm going to vendor A or vendor B and whatever, because I understand that we don't always fit what someone's looking for. And we've had people before where they're like, well, I'm going to go to Stellarvue. It's like, all right, say hi to Vic. This industry is really small, and this is not a get rich quick industry by any means. The people who are in it are here because they want to be here and because they love it. And the running joke is, how do you make $1 million in the telescope industry? And let's start with 3. So but it's not everybody I've talked to. The money is obviously, it's just how the world works. We all have to understand that we have to make a living in order to do the things that we want to do. But everyone that I know and am friends with, vendor-wise in astronomy, when you talk to them, they carry around the same seed that a lot of our customers do, where we love astronomy for A, B, C reasons, and we just happen to have a career in this, but we all love it for the same reasons. All of our customers, we go to a dark, like you said, a dark sky. I'm as inspired by a dark sky as a beginner is. It's just phenomenal. And I think deep down, we all share that same deep passion for it. And just because we sell telescopes or whatever has nothing to do with it. And I don't feel like that really takes away from it. It's just we have a different light on how telescopes come into reality, but deep down it's still that that little kid who got their first telescope and is excited to explore the night sky is where I find most people are at, and that they're actually quite genuine in making you the best astronomer you can be.
I mean, and learning, life is a learning experience. You're going to be learning your entire life. And, I had the opportunity to do one of my other passion, which was to work in California state parks for 30 years, as a park ranger and a superintendent. I, at one time, was the chief of interpretation. And when I say interpretation, not of languages, but of the cultural and natural history. And so I got to build 40 different visitor centers. In fact, for the last 3 days, I was up in the North Coast, where one of my visitor center projects was up at Van Dam State Park. And, so I got to actually be out in the woods and enjoy nature that way. But I always did star talks whenever I was there with various telescopes that I made. And I think the thing that I really enjoyed the most was getting together with people, like you say, that were passionate. The people of the Santa Rosa area, Santa Rosa Astronomical Society, they were having trouble. They wanted to build an observatory up at the geysers, and they wanted the building to be a cinder block where they would fill the cinder block with solid concrete, and the county wouldn't allow it. And the reason they wanted that was people would come up there and they would shoot into the observatory, and they didn't want their telescope destroyed. Well, I said, why don't you put the observatory in one of our parks? We have a park, Sugarloaf Ridge State Park, and it's got very low attendance, but it's it's in the city. And they just jumped on it. and they got donations from wineries. They raised all this money to build this observatory for a 40-inch telescope that they actually made. I mean, polished everything, a 40-inch, very fast telescope. And, seeing that and then realizing now, decades later, how many people learned what they learned, all that they could from that observatory, the Robert Ferguson Observatory. And the fire that went through there recently almost took the observatory. But the firefighters, the firefighters in that area are very protective of their parks. And they were able to stop the fire literally feet from the building, which was awesome. And of course, we've had Mount Wilson now almost on fire, and the fires in California are
ridiculous.
Horrendous. And it's going to take more than just raking, folks. I mean, there's a thing going on called climate change, and so it's a problem. And having the opportunity, and especially when we get through this pandemic, having the opportunity to go places again by air, for astronomers to go to Australia or New Zealand to see the southern sky, and to go and see eclipses and stuff. I mean, it's all there. And it's just like right now, everybody's suffering from the smoke coming from California. And I apologize. I'm sorry that those of you on the East Coast are getting our smoke. But the smoke will clear. And I often tell people that a visual astronomer, somebody like myself who really enjoys observing visually, like looking at Jupiter or whatever, it's sort of like fishing. Sometimes the fish bite, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes you don't catch anything. When you go outside to observe on a new moon night, sometimes it's horrible. The weather's bad, it's turbulent, but you just be patient and you'll get those stunning nights of super seeing. And it just takes a great deal of patience. And nothing takes more patience than trying to make 99 screw lenses, believe me. It takes us 6 months to get these optics perfected. And, you talk about this being a small industry. It is a boutique little industry. And every company has its own niche and has an important role to play. I mean, Skywatcher makes a good telescope. And for people getting started, I mean, it's a good choice. The optics aren't produced the way we do them here. They're on a different level. But boy, if it wasn't for Skywatcher getting a lot of people good telescopes, we wouldn't have the customers we have, which are the customer that wants the very discriminating customer that wants the very highest Strill optics, something that takes a long time and therefore costs a lot of money to produce.
I know that's one of the big things that sets Stellarvue apart, and I've had this conversation with customers before as well, where we've had customers, especially on like our Esprit triplets, they're like, well, why don't you release the stro ratios on that? Well, we're a mass production company. We are designed, our whole business model is to make tons of telescopes, and they're designed and figured to meet the standards. They're designed to meet or exceed the standards that a telescope should be. And we do have telescopes that are quite well figured, but we understand that it's just not our business model to where we're going to test every single unit and really, I mean, they're all tested. They have to be tested before they ship, but we're not going to take that time to individually inspect it down to what you guys do. And there's some people that might skewer me for saying that. They're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, it's just a different crowd of people, and it takes, we have a lot of people that ask us, it's like, well, why don't I get an inspection certificate with every Esprit triplet? Well, the factory inspects and checks all the lenses as they should, but the amount of time, money, and effort it takes to, like you guys do, to go through every ounce of detail to pull that out, it's really an art form, but it takes a lot of time for you to, like you said, 6 months for you to get that one telescope out the door. And that is that does take some time to do. So, and it's just different levels of the industry. I don't think anybody's making
Yeah.
crappy telescopes at all in the industry right now. You can get a lot of good stuff. It's just you have different levels of places, and as you go, you just have different levels of quality as you raise up in those levels. But on the flip side of that, you do pay for that. So that's what you would expect on certain things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, and I'll go over this in the Zygo room a little bit to talk about the process. But, you know, it's a matter of what people can afford. If Skywatcher did the work we do, they would charge the price we charge. And, you know, the industry, the customers in the industry set the price many times for things, what they can afford and that type of thing. I do really think Skywatcher is a really good telescope for the money. I really do. And people are always baiting me, wanting me to, you know, and they love to try and bait me into the reflector versus refractor thing. You know, like they'll make some comment about, hey, reflectors are better, and I just smile because it's like everything has a purpose. You know, if you're going to look at Stephan's quintet, you're not going to use a 4-inch refractor. You know, you're going to use a big light bucket, and we've got bigger telescopes coming. I mean, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. But you know, it's you know, particularly you know, visual people that want a 22-inch knob or something. Boy, you're going to see things with that our telescopes would never show you. You know, it's the same kind of thing. When you get up to a real high Strill ratio, we found it's above 9.8. It's very stunning, and it's very funny because I went back and looked, and Roland Christian had said basically the same thing, like, I don't know, a decade or two before, and when we started producing 98 Strill, and we looked at the way it looked on the test bench, there was a difference. There is something really amazing about when you get up to that level, and now our 102 and above are 99 Strill minimum. And then we did this before the pandemic, and we were getting caught up because it was taking, like, you know, 6 months or so to get a lens from the beginning to the end. Now, let me clarify something. We're not taking this lens and spending 6 months on this lens. I mean, think about it. We only sell like one telescope every 6 months. We're producing sets of maybe 18 lenses. And we go through a process where we're, you know, when we get down to the final figuring to bring up the Strill ratio, we'll be testing it on the Zygo. We're going to be marking where we need to draw attention to it, you know, where we need to start rubbing, what kind of tools we need to eliminate zones, that type of thing. And then we'll put it back into the machine, or we'll hand figure it while we're testing the next one. And then once that is rubbed, once that lens is being worked on, we have to sit it down for, did I
A
just
little
lose
bit,
you
but
for
you're
a
back
second?
now. So
Okay, yeah, something just interfered. So once we hand figure it or use it, we have to have it sit for a day to cool down, to get equalized before we go over and test it. So it's a process where we're working on a lot of lenses at once, but each lens, if we start at its birth and we go to the very end, it's about 6 months. And so it's a unique thing. And our customer base is minuscule compared to yours, Kevin. I mean, you know, it's a completely different situation. But many people that have come to Stellarvue had owned a Skywatcher and in the past, and you know, we talked to so many people at NEAF who have various different types of telescopes, and a lot of people, I find, expect a little too much out of a telescope that costs a little too little, if that makes sense. I mean, they buy $100 telescope and they want it to do everything, and that's just not possible. So I think what's cool about this industry is you've got your, you know, Stellarvues and your astrophysics and your TECs, and you've got your then you've got your Skywatchers and Celestrons, and you've got that whole large audience of people. And then, of course, you have the telescopes that you buy in the department store, which are horrible. So, So, you've got really three different groups of people, and they may or may not graduate up to premier, the premier level. But it's whatever anybody wants. And right now with COVID, it's amazing because people are at home dreaming about these telescopes they've always wanted to own, and our phone's ringing off the hook. I've had to add 4 people to my staff. We're just trying to keep up, as I know you guys are, and it's a nice problem to have. But I remember my master optician, Alex, said to me one day, he goes, "We just can't keep up with this." I said, "Don't worry about it, Alex. At least we don't have a comet." And of course, a week later, we had a comet with a
Don't ever let Vic say anything
so
again.
Yeah, I just need to shut up. So anyway, it's kind of an interesting thing. But I come in here. I'm usually here 7 days a week. It's just a lot of fun, to do the work, and it's just something I really enjoy. Fortunately, my wife is very understanding.
Big quotes, bold, italicized, very right there.
I remember the cartoon about what you say when you bring home your next telescope, and I think one of them was, "Boy, honey, you have very pretty eyes," or something like that. It's kind of a process we go through. But I digress. What was your next question?
So you're in the shop right now. Would you care to show us around what you can show us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, we have certain things hidden because of the fact that we do some commercial lenses. We've done some space optics objectives, and we are working on some NDAs where we're doing the work for Department of Defense. So we have those things covered up. But most of our telescopes are astronomical telescopes. That's what we really specialize in. So I think I will. Now, I don't know if I can flip this around or not. I don't know if my arm's long enough. Anyway, so I've been sitting here at the flow bench. So we have a HEPA flow bench here where we do all of our optical cleaning. As we work our way around, we have our grinding and polishing machines where we'll be doing 8 at a time there, 10 with those two. We have some of the area where we do a lot of our hand figuring. We have a 24-inch Nord here. We have a 36-inch Strasbourg here. So we in 36-inch refractor, which
chop.
Of course, not going to happen. Yeah, right. Currently, what we're working on here is our large field flatteners. These are the cells for these giant field flatteners, blackening one of these elements so there won't be any reflections. To get here, we of course have to design the cell. And I think we have my machinist here, master machinist, Tanner. And this is Tanner, and he's working on, can you show us the cell?
There it is. So, yeah, you can go move it around.
Have I got that centered okay?
Yeah.
Kevin? Okay. So he's designed the cell, and then we build the cells on our CNC machines. So it's all fun stuff, and Tanner does a great job of machining and designing for us, with us. Thanks, Tanner. Okay, so note to self, I need a selfie stick.
Or get one of those DJI support arms and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. I do have fairly long arms because I can't see unless I hold the book out that far. Top secret. Sorry, can't show you. So this is the Zygo interferometer that we talk about, and we've completely changed how we use it. We used to use it horizontally. If you look at the Dennis DeChico video where Dennis with Sky and Telescope came in and we gave a complete tour, The zygo used to sit on the table here, and it used to hit a large flat mirror and go up vertically. We've decided to change it this way and mount it vertically so that the lens is pointing skyward, just as it would when it's observing. The 6-inch beam from the zygo interferometer comes through our 6-inch objective. It's a special cell. This looks like it's a lens cell the normal way, but it's actually backwards because the front lens is in the top. And it goes down, hits the sphere, and the sphere brings the light back just the way it came down and into the zygo for analyzation. And we were just testing this one this morning. And so this is the test. I'm trying to line this up. You know, it's funny, I don't have my reverse screen. How do I? Oh, wait a minute. Voila. So this is the test rig, and this is a live view of the optic. You can see that the atmosphere going on. You can see how the waves are churning and such. We like to test in the morning, particularly because the wind, the turbulence in this room is minimized. We do have fans that we use to minimize the turbulence. But this particular one tested out pretty good, 994. As we look at the test report, we see a greatly amplified view of what the lens looks like. We see this spot is still there. That's the ding that somebody put into the flat on the zygo there. We are going to get a new flat pretty soon for that, just so that cosmetic thing is gone. 994 strill, not too bad. And this is just one of the next 152 to, this one has been finished after 6 months of work or so, and we'll now be sending this off to the coder. Now you'll notice up here it says model 70T. That is because Alex was working on a 70T right before this, and that has to be manually changed. But this, in fact, is the 152 that we're testing. I can put my finger in front of it and you can see it go across there. So it's kind of a cool machine. Now, a lot of people say, gee, you bought the zygo so you could give customers test reports. And that's not the reason. The test report is the last thing we do. But what we do with the zygo interferometer is we analyze each surface, and when the surfaces aren't right, we can map the issues and we can work on each one of them. So it's a machine that we use continuously through the hand figuring process. It's not used just to get a number for you. It's used for us to get that number up higher and higher. And once we get that number to this level, and we've done all the figuring, a lot of extensive hand figuring on 2 different surfaces in particular on this one, then we're done. And so the zygo is not something that's just used for certification. It's something that we use to make it happen, to get it that accurate, because you can't do that any other way than with about $500,000 worth of test equipment. So anyway, I hope that explained.
No, I think that's really cool. People get to see the background behind the scenes of what all that's done, because especially when you start talking Strel, that can muddy the waters really quick, because I feel like there's some emphasis on, there's a lot of people that will run with Strel as the end all be all, but there's so much that goes into it for that. So
yeah, and Strel isn't the only number. It's very important to understand that you can have a high Strel and you can still have a spherical issue. So we shorthand it by saying it's 99 Strel, but our spherical error number is a fraction of a mass-produced optic. Our coma, our astigmatism number, very low. we learned the hard way that you can't just go for a high strill ratio. You've got to have those other numbers down very low so that you do get a good star test, and so you don't have trefoil. Trefoil is where the stars appear triangular, and that can happen if you have a pinched lens cell, but it can also happen if you have long range inhomogeneity in one of the glass surfaces. You can end up with trefoil, and a lot of telescopes out there have some of it. And so the stars appear triangular. We want to get rid of all that. And so using high homogeneity glass is very important. It's expensive to buy glass that has high homogeneity. People are always saying, oh, is that FPL 53? That's all they ask. They think that's the important thing. No, there are a lot of other questions that need to be asked in terms of, whether or not this optic is a superior optic. And the funny thing about it is many people call them, they go, we don't want FCD 100, we want FPL 53. And I'll say, you do realize that the ABA rating, the dispersion is identical on those two glasses. And that as long as the homogeneity is good in the glass, you couldn't tell which is which, I mean, so there's those kinds of things. We end up picking FPL 53 just because customers want it, even though there's really no difference. So there's a lot of that stuff that goes on in the industry, a lot of misinformation. And I think it's largely due to chat rooms where you have self-professed experts who are very good at reading catalogs and looking online at stores and reading stuff, but they really don't have any experience in producing optics. And so they haven't learned by trial and error, as most of us have. I mean, Roland and Marge and I will talk at dinner after one night at NEAF, and we'll just talk about how much money we've lost just because of bad glass. It can be very, very, very expensive.
We've had that happen before. So, we've gotten patches that were not good, and you basically have to eat it. And
you eat it. I learned the hard way. I used was it ZNK7, but at any rate, I got this glass and I produced, I think, 25 lens sets. You can imagine how long that took. 160s. They were all bad. After about a year and a half of work, I found out that they had trefoil, and then I was able to find that out, that it was caused by long range inhomogeneity. And so you end up having some very expensive doorstops at this point.
Well, Skywatcher doesn't announce what ED glass we're using anymore. We got some flack over that, but I know there's other companies that don't either. But I think it does hone in on, it's kind of a marketing thing where, it's FPL, blah, blah, blah. But, there's a lot of, as technology advances too, there's new glass that comes on the market that is either easier to work with, it's more affordable, but still produces what you want, or because they're constantly coming out with new things. Like, for example, FCD 100 is fairly new in the world, and that's kind of crawled up the tier to being one of those, nice glasses that people want to look for. But I think people get stuck in that.
Yeah, I mean, the experience I've had with FCD 100 has been okay. I mean, we made some of our 130s out of FCD 100, and there was no difference between it and the FPL 53 if the glass was good. Again, all these are caveated on is if the glass is good. The 130 is interesting because, for, 16, 18 years, we've been making 130s, and we've made it out of all kinds of glass. We started with shot FK51, not FPL 51, FK51. We started with that. Then we went to FPL 51. We made an ED, and then we've made it out of Russian OK4, where the lenses that we obtained from LCOS, and then we've used FPL 53. We did mostly FPL 53, and then we've done some FCD 100, and they've all been very good. I think probably the ones with the highest ABA number, in other words, the lowest dispersion, are the ones that have the best contrast, generally speaking. But of course, a lot of that depends on how accurately it's polished. If you have an FPL 53 Apo triplet and it has spherical error, and you're not going to have the contrast that you would with a 9/9 strill optic. You just there's so many other factors that come into play. But to get back to your initial point, you're right. Strill number isn't everything. It's a combination of factors that make a difference. By the way, we had a Skywatcher telescope sent to us, and we tested it, and it was 9/6 strill. So good job. I mean, it met the old Zeiss standard. So it's interesting. I've tested apocromatic optics that were sold as apocromatic by other companies that were as bad as 0.7.
Now, just so people know, there's diffraction limit, which is 1/4 wave, which most mass-produced stuff is. That's about 0.9, I think, is where that starts to land, Strel-wise, I think. There's a lot of variable in that, though.
Yeah. And basically, for people that still are confused about what strill means, I think a simple way to put it is, if it's 9/0 strill, 90% of the light is going where it's supposed to. And if it's 9/9 strill, 99% of the light is going where it's supposed to. So, I mean, that's a real greatly simplified, but at least it gives a person some idea. The reason I mentioned the one that was 0.7 strill is it keeps floating around, and people keep selling it. The first time I learned about it was when a customer got one of our big field flatteners, and he goes, "There's something wrong with your field flattener. This field is horrible. It's all distorted and whatever." And I said, "Well, that can't be. What's your scope?" "Well, it's a brand X." "Okay." He says, "Well, I'm going to be going to Nightfall, which is an event in Anza Borrego Desert in the fall." And so I said, "Well, I'm going to be giving a talk there. So let me come on over and take a look at it, what you've got." So I came by and I said, "Now, have you star tested it?" And he goes, "Oh, I don't have any eyepieces. I'm just an imager." So I pulled out my Optimus eyepieces and looked through it. I said, "This is the worst star test I've ever seen." I said, "I think the problem is the telescope." And it wasn't a serialized telescope. And so what the guy did, we brought it back and I tested it, and sure enough, it was in the 0.7. And we saved all of our data. And I explained to him what the problem was. He sold the telescope, bought one of ours, and he was happy from then on. That telescope keeps appearing. People keep calling me and saying, "I've got a brand X, blah, 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 and your field flattener's not working." See, this is affecting my reputation. And I had nothing to do with the telescope. So, there are some horrible telescopes out there. So it's a problem. It's a problem. And I think you want to go with a company that has a good reputation, like Skywatcher, where the optics are going to be made by master opticians that know what they're doing, And there's a lot of I don't want to call them gray market, but there's a lot of telescopes that companies can buy from China, from mass-produced companies. And they can be good and they can be not so good. It varies quite a bit. And also, shipping from China over to here can cause some issues. Sometimes telescopes are just knocked out of alignment.
That's why we check ours when they come in, because we all have seen what shipping does to anything. So you have to be careful with that. Yeah. We're coming down to the last 15 minutes. I know we have some questions I want to get to, so we've got some buffer for them. The first question, we kind of covered that one already, so let's go to this one. There was one in here. Is it possible to order the 152 scope with OK4 or FCD 100 glass?
No. Every time you produce a new optics set, it's expensive. I tell people, a lot of people say, "Can you make me a blah, blah, blah?" I go, the problem is this will be a whatever, $5,000 telescope, if you buy the second one. But when you buy the first one, all the tooling, all the work that goes into developing it, the design, the buying the glass of a certain size, getting it curve generated, all that is expensive. And so our 152 is made with FPL 53, a lanthanum in the front, a BK7 in the front and lanthanum in the rear. And it's the best design that we have found. And that's the way we make it. Now, if you were to put FCD 100 in there, it would probably be pretty close. That probably could be done, but we'd want to tweak the design. I mean, we tweak the design just based on the data that comes from the glass when it arrives. We do a little bit of adjustment with each delivery of glass from O'Hara.
Awesome.
So yeah, the answer to that would be no.
Next question. Any plans? There we go. We're back now. Any plans of any additions to the eyepieces line?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. We plan to do a few things, and we don't have those finalized yet, but we're going to be adding some new eyepieces. Probably add. Well, I don't want to say at this point. There's a few designs that we're looking
Very
at.
Cool. Other than the next question, other than design of metal parts, how much metal work is done in-house?
Oh, quite a bit. We do our rings. We do our cells. We do. We either do the tubes on our lathe or we outsource the tubes. Carbon fiber tubes are always outsourced from China. American carbon fiber tubing is the same thing, and it's 10 times more expensive. It's like tennis shoes. If you want tennis shoes, you got to buy them. They got to come from China. So we have some of that, as a factor. We do outsource some of our tubes to companies that are in China that do a good job on tubes. So some of the scopes have our tubes and some of the scopes have outsourced tubes. It really depends on the quality. We have to make sure the quality is going to be equal to our quality and the price, because we want to get our telescopes down in price as much as we can. One of the things we did that was kind of revolutionary and scary was that we stopped selling our telescopes through dealers, because we wanted to charge less money for our telescopes, and we had to do that in order to maintain costs. We were at a break-even point when we sold telescopes to dealers, and by selling them direct only from Stellarvue, we can actually pass that savings along a little bit. And so we're going to be lowering some prices slightly or maintaining the prices the way they are, even though some of the costs of aluminum and glass has gone up.
Next question. What was it? I'm sorry.
Is it good? Is it good when I ramble like this?
I think it's kind of fun to add. Adds dimension to it.
Okay, all right.
Next question. Can I send my SV102 ED in for testing? Okay.
No. We don't test telescopes that were not ED, was an import. And we visually tested them. We rejected all the ones that were not good, but the downtime that would take on the Zygo, reconfiguring it for a 102 ED would take away from customers who have been waiting, for 6 months.
Especially as you mentioned earlier that you use them for use the Zygo for figuring production. So
yeah, well, it's used all day. Yeah, it's used all day. We'd have to take it out, at the end of the day. It's not used all the time. Like right now, nobody's here. Because I don't want to have to wear my mask, even though it is a star mask. It's kind of cool. But everybody has decided to go to the other buildings right now and work while I do this. Because if these machines are running, you couldn't hear me. We have to really focus on our customers who, are waiting for these scopes. And there's nothing worse than having to wait. for a scope. Well, there's something worse than having to wait. It's the scope arrives and it's storming out. You know, you always have the new telescope curse. In fact, we used to put a spacer box in our telescopes, and it was an empty box just to hold the thing in, and I'd write on it, "Clouds do not open." And the customer would email me and say, I accidentally opened
That's
the box.
awesome.
It's raining. That was kind of fun. Yeah.
Let's see. Next question. Vic, how does the glass arrive at Stellarvue? Is it shaped as a lens, or is it just flat?
We order both discs and we order both curve we order discs, or we order curve generated discs. So they're already curve generated, but they still require grinding and polishing. It really depends on what scope we're talking about as to how we do that. Let's see, I think I have one here. This is how it came from O'Hara. This is our 140, I think. Looks small. Maybe it's the 130. It's probably the 130 then. The 130, so it's already, this is a pressing, so it's curved on both sides. And then, but we have to go in there and we have to usually, make sure it's not wedged, machine it, and then we grind it, and then we polish it. We start with 40 micron and we end up with a very fine polish that we use, special polish just for the FPL 53, but that's how that arrived. And we like to get the pressings from O'Hara because they've proven to be very good. Now, there's a size limit, and this is where you get into your thing about glass types, Kevin. There's a new glass from O'Hara called FPL 55, and it can be made larger, because as you go larger and larger with these pressings, you have to do pressings over a certain size. Because the glass ingots are just not any bigger. So you have to press it. And so, and O'Hara is very good at doing that and maintaining homogeneity because they anneal it very slowly. But the FPL 55 gives us the opportunity to go even bigger and still maintain the homogeneity. So we'll probably be using that with our next telescope.
Nice. Next question. To what optical standards are your 9x50 deluxe finder scope figured?
I have no idea. The 9x50 finder scopes, sell for under $200, and they're made in China. They always have been, and they're very good. People really like them. And I spec'd it out. I actually designed the finder scope with a prism diagonal that had full multi-coatings. At the time, all of them had magnesium fluoride coatings, not nearly as transmissive. And then with the focuser, and then with the eyepiece, and we designed the way that it holds the illuminator. And I patented the whole thing. And because at that point, Stellarvue had 2 employees, me and somebody else, I let the patent run past the time limit. So you see that same design used elsewhere. Prior to that, it was just, a diagonal stuck in, no focusing ability, and you had to focus the front lens. But I worked with a company in China to produce those because making them in the US they'd be about $450, and nobody's going to spend that for a finder scope. So we've never Zygo tested. It's kind of an interesting idea, though. Maybe after hours,
I want a picture of the 50 on the Zygo.
Yeah.
Next question. If the cost/distribution was not an issue, what will be the spec of your ultimate scope for you?
If cost was no issue, what would be the spec of the ultimate scope for me? Any one of our 102 and above, 99 Strill. I mean, you just can't get any better than that. And I am really particular. I mean, I'm retentive. I mean, it's not healthy. And I need to have that level of optical quality. So it would be any one of our scopes. The interesting thing about the 140 is that we're just starting to get the first of those out now. And each one of those will be 9/9 strill. It will be the one telescope in our line where every one of them is 9/9 strill. So that would be the ultimate, I think, for me. And I'll be getting that. I keep, getting a telescope, and then somebody wants to buy a scope and we're out of them, and I'll say, well, I could sell you mine. And then, so I currently don't have a scope right now. I'd really like to get a 152.
Oh, up on that.
We get caught up.
Yeah. The old Stellarvue Planetary EPs are excellent. I use the 2.9, 4.9, and 6.1 on my SV70 Raptor for the double shadow transit on Jupiter. Are you going to make more or something else planetary?
I like those eyepieces too. They didn't sell very well. Those were produced by a company in Taiwan, and we still have those, some of those. And so that's one of the things I want to look at, our long eye relief eyepieces next. And that's on our list. We just got a huge list.
I know how that is.
That's our problem. Yeah, I mean, there's 10 of us here. This is not a huge company. So
most of the companies are rather small when you start to see how it is. Yeah. This is a good one, and I know you'll be able to nail it. Carbon fiber or steel?
Steel. Was the person?
I guess so. Or I guess so. When you're making a tube out of a refractor, is it carbon fiber, steel, or aluminum?
Refractors over a certain size, carbon fiber. Let me back up. Let's start with aluminum. Aluminum is the perfect medium to make a telescope tube with. It cools down rapidly. It acts as a heat sink to the cell, so it really cools everything down quickly, and it equalizes, right away. It's not insulating. A big carbon fiber tube, and I mean big, like a 6-inch or so, can retain heat. Also, some of the composites, like some of the plastic tubes that are made, really retain heat. I've had a number of customers ask if I can make an aluminum tube for them, and of course we can't do one-off, so we can't do that. So aluminum tubing is very good. Carbon fiber is lighter. Now, when you're in smaller sizes like our 4-inch and probably even a 5-inch, carbon fiber and aluminum, there's very little difference. But when you get these big tubes and you get that atmosphere that's warm inside, that can be a problem. I tested carbon fiber versus aluminum with 130s, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago, and the aluminum cooled down much faster. But that carbon fiber tube was velvet lined. So I think I was kind of, contributing to the problem of holding in the heat. So our 102s, when we made those, we just paint the insides of the tube. Actually, we have them paint them. Those tubes are made in China, and they cool down rapidly. I've never had anybody complain about cool down. I don't think I'd make a 152 with a carbon fiber tube. I'd probably go up to the 140. I'd want to do some testing first.
That's always been a big topic that's come up for us too. Is art.
Oh, another thing I need to mention about that's kind of important is that, people say I want carbon fiber because it won't shrink like aluminum does when it gets cold. What they forget about is that the focal length of the lens reduces when the lens cools down. So actually, in a way, aluminum is better for keeping focus, depending on the size of the lens, the F ratio, the aluminum that's used, and all that kind of stuff. But using a tube that does not contract, you're forgetting that the lens focal length contracts when it gets colder. So there's that.
Get a motor focuser.
Yeah, you need sensing focuser. Optec, Feather Touch. A lot of companies make motorized focusers with sensors that, you have to dial them in, but once you do, the problem's done. You got that taken care of.
Last question, and then we'll wrap up for today. The cost of refractors across the board has gone up quite a bit over the past 5 years. In your opinion, what is driving the big cost increase?
Has it increased?
Glass usually goes up. So.
Well, glass is going up. I mean, every year when I order O'Hara, I'm shocked by the cost increase. Boy, I should have bought 200 sets back then and not 100 or whatever. So glass is a very because the rare earth materials go up in cost and stuff. So O'Hara really, you can see why they're charging more. Metals costs are going up. Think about shipping too. I mean, when you're shipping cross country, UPS and FedEx has gone way up with COVID and everything else. So yeah, costs are generally, I think, rising everywhere on everything. But I think that if you compare, I guess what I'm doing is I'm thinking way back, like 20, 30 years ago, the cost of an 8-inch, your 8-inch reflector is a fraction of what it was way back then. If you were to buy a cave and then consider how inflation works. So I don't know. What do you think?
You pretty much nailed a lot of that. It's just the raw materials are what's going up, and of course you still have to make the margins to keep your business afloat. So that affect. And there's different ways you can.
It's helpful.
Just So it's just how It's just how the world works.
You know what I'm amazed about is how, like, I had this one guy that came by NEAF every year complaining, really upset, really angry at how he never could get a good telescope. And he kept coming to the Stellarvue booth. And it was always because he bought the cheapest version of whatever was out there. And he always complained about it. I go, maybe you have to realize that, putting more time into it it'll cost more money. But for like 3 years in a row, third year, I said to the guy, stop coming to my booth. You're not taking my advice, but, think about what your time is worth, and think about what you want to do with this thing, with this telescope. Do you want to take fantastic images? You better have a fairly good camera, and you better have a fairly good telescope if you're going to do that. If you want to look at things visually, you better have accurate optics, otherwise you're going to be unhappy. And so, there's that to think about.
The final question, because we just have to bring it up, is how's Jan?
We took 3 days off together, and Jan's doing incredibly well. The vice president of this company is still maintaining control from a distance. She doesn't work here, but she does my logistics for me, and we take a walk every morning, and we talk about business and stuff. Jan's amazing. She's an amazing.
You guys haven't had a chance to meet Vic's wife, Jan. Next time you're at NEAF or at an event, stop by and say hi if she's there.
She's amazing. Yeah, I'm a lucky guy.
Someone has to put up with you.
God, you're telling me.
Well, that's pretty much it for today. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your day and week. And I know you guys are busy doing what you do over there. But I really appreciate you sitting down for an hour with me. If you guys are interested in Stellarvue telescopes, it's www.stellarvue.com, correct?
Correct. And view is VUE. So it's SELLARVUE. The VIEW website was taken when I started the company 22 years ago. So that's how we spell it. And give us a call. Isaac would love to talk to you all about telescopes.
We'll put the link down in the description below if you're watching this later. So that's pretty much it. This is Vic from Stellarvue. Thank you all for joining us. Have a safe weekend. Go out and view with your telescope. Whatever telescope you've got, just go out and observe the night sky. It's awesome and it's enjoyable, whether it's, just getting started or if you got a big fancy refractor or Dob, just go out there and enjoy the nighttime sky. So, yeah, thanks, Vic. Have a good weekend, and we'll catch up with you guys later.
All right, clear skies, everybody. All right, bye.
Just a sec. Yeah, hold on just a sec.